Gaetz, the biggest firebrand inside of the House of Representatives.
You're not taking Matt Gaetz off the board, okay? Because Matt Gaetz is an American patriot and Matt Gaetz is an American hero.
We will not continue to allow the uniparty to run this town without a fight.
I want to thank you, Matt Gaetz, for holding the line.
Matt Gaetz is a courageous man. If we had hundreds of Matt Gaetz in D.C., the country turns around. It's that simple.
He's so tough, he's so strong, he's smart, and he loves this country. Matt Gaetz.
It is the honor of my life to fight alongside each and every one of you. We will save America. It's choose your fighter time. Send in the Firebrands. Welcome back to Firebrand. We're broadcasting live out of room 2021 of the Rayburn House Office Building here in the Capitol Complex in Washington, D.C. It's Friday, and we are going to have a focus on crime and justice in this discussion. And it's really interesting here on Capitol Hill. We showed you the hearings in yesterday's episode from the committee where victims of violent crime were talking about the policy changes that directly resulted in deteriorating conditions from them. We talked about migrant crime and how we're creating a whole new class of criminals and a whole new class of victims as a consequence of what's happening on the border, essentially having no border, flying people in as a consequence of them just getting on the CBP1 app and claiming asylum. But then you have also the Kamala Harris approach to this, where they've trotted out Merrick Garland to say that norms at the Justice Department are really important to be maintained. And he does this big pep rally out at the Department of Justice where they get everyone together and say they are the great protectors and defenders of the norms of justice. I wrote an essay that published in Real Clear Politics that the AG's pep rally is dispositive proof that, in fact, it was President Trump who prevailed in the debate recently because it was Trump who made the allegation that the Justice Department had been weaponized against him. That was not sufficiently answered by the vice president, and so they had to go and run Merrick Garland out to make the case that she was unsuccessful at. If she had prevailed on that point in the debate, they would have allowed her words to be what would be ringing in their advertisements and in their earned media. Instead, they had to go trot out Merrick Garland. And there's another point about crime stats where President Trump was vindicated once again. The term has been heard, throughout the country. Trump was right, whether it was the Russia hoax or the Ukraine impeachment hoax. Now it's the crime rates that we see under the policies that are embraced by Kamala Harris. We heard during the debate the other night that violent crime hadn't gone up. That was the big moderator fact check. The reality is actually the difference. So you had Muir saying in the debate, quote, "The FBI says overall violent crime rates are coming down." Well, it turns out that was yet another bit of fake news from the mainstream media. Today, a new DOJ report comes out showing how crime rates have soared into the stratosphere under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. In 2020, Trump's last full year in office, there were about 1.5 million violent crimes, excluding the simple assaults. Now, by 2023, that number is about 2.5 million. It's an increase of about 1 million crimes. So why do they continue to lie to us? You had total violent crime during Trump's last year in office at a steady decrease from prior years. Okay, it was a steady decrease. It was going down. And now you've got a massive increase in this amount of violent crime. And it begs the question, was Trump actually debating Kamala Harris or was it the moderators? Regardless, there's no denying it now. Violent crime was going down under Trump. It has been increased during Kamala's stay at the Naval Observatory. And Darren, before we get into I'm joined now by Dr. Darren Beattie. He is the publisher at Revolver News. Revolver News is a terrific website, revolver.news. You're going to get the breaking news there. You're going to get the analysis. You're going to get some of the best investigative reporting on what's going on in the country. And you're also going to get the buried leads from the mainstream media that Dr. Beattie and his team will pull out at revolver.news and make sure you're getting the full story. And there's been some great reporting that you've been sharing and publishing on revolver.news regarding some of this migrant crime. But before we get to that, Dr. Beattie, how should the American people react to kind of the deep fake that is the cell job that the FBI, DOJ try to do with the release of these crime statistics when people live the experience of their own safety each and every day, and folks just instinctively know that you're less safe now on America's streets than you were when Trump was president?
Well, that's a really great question. And sometimes it's hard to parse these things out because there is a certain bias toward, people being exposed to the reality of crime more through sort of viral social media clips. It could lead people to maybe incorrectly extrapolate, what's really going on more broadly. I will admit myself the statistics that you just showed, because my intuitive sense would have been that violent crime is still very high, unacceptably high. And my sense was that sort of quality of life, sort of lesser tier crimes, not murder, but quality of life stuff like the shoplifting we see and the conditions leading to the deterioration of the commons and those types of things are at an all-time high. But my per se, while in less as at, say, the apex of the George Floyd fiasco in 2020. But the statistics that showed indicate that that's not actually the case, that we're actually worse off now in terms of violent crime, even than the summer of Floyd period, which was, I think, sort of a local maximum for quite where violent. So it's just, I'm even astonished to see how high violent crime is across the board, not just what I thought would have been at the apex right now, which is these sort of not murder, but quality of life versions of crime like, convenience store theft and muggings and things like this. So it's actually remarkable to see. But at the end of the day, it's really not too far off the intuition. We see the basic principles of civilized life on a day-to-day basis, and that's become the new reality in Biden, Kamala's America.
And it's the policies that they continue to champion, that they celebrate, that they say are effective. Sure. And I was recently in New York, and I had to endure the demoralizing and humiliating experience of having to hit a button and call for a store employee at a Walgreens just to get a razor blade out. And you just think in the third world, they don't live like this. And we're accepting it. And I believe that when they do the soft on crime stuff for the retail theft, that you actually increase the acuity of more violent crimes as well, because you're saying what you're willing to tolerate. And if directionally you're willing to tolerate more violations of law, then that's what you're going to get, not just in that isolated area where you expressly demonstrate your tolerance, but you're going to get it up and down the acuity levels of different types of crime. But the new wave of crime is the migrant crime, and there's been some good reporting at revolver.news on this. I want to go to the piece that you put up just days ago. Shocking update: pet-eating Haitians in Ohio aren't the worst part of Harris Biden's latest migrant deception. And you shared a post from Creative Dreamer, and here's the post. Absolutely heartbreaking moment in Springfield, Ohio. Residents tell mayor that she can't take it anymore as Haitian migrants squat on her lawn, litter in her yard, and harass her elderly husband daily. The mayor of Springfield does not want the people to see this. And that's what people can say if they go check it out at revolver.news. And here's how the reporting continues. In case you didn't realize, the U.S. is now being invaded by a horde of pet-eating Haitian migrants. These uncivilized migrants have been settled in small towns across America, and now they're eating people's pets and the ducks and geese at local parks. Not to mention, they're causing massive filth in these towns and squatting in people's lawns. It's gotten so bad the residents of these towns and communities are literally begging their elected officials for help. And I will add on to this. When I went to Yuma, Arizona, I met with some of the farmers, and they said that these hordes of Haitians would come over and just set up in the middle of their grain fields or in their lettuce fields. And with the health requirements, understandably, that they're under from their own professional association, they have to then destroy tons of crops that fuel their opportunity to continue to keep land under agriculture management. And they specifically talked about the groups of Haitians being very entitled, being very violent, refusing to leave, whereas groups from other countries, while it's certainly a challenge and devastating and destructive, there wasn't the confrontational element that people shared with me about the groups of Haitians. So, what brought you to this story? How are people reacting to it on Revolver, Darren?
No, it's a great question and very important issue. I just want to return briefly to your mark that you don't even see some of this stuff in the actual third world. And I think that gestures toward a very important point that sheds light on the nature of the dystopia in which we live under. And that is, typically you have either a draconian kind of centralized government surveillance state, no liberties, but you at least get a bit of safety and security out of that. There are not a lot of, migrant crime on the streets of Pyongyang, for instance, notwithstanding all of the other reasons you wouldn't want to live there. But there's this weird sense in which we experience the world, which is we live in a country now where you can get arrested, charged, and convicted of a felony for circulating memes mocking Hillary Clinton. Yet migrants can come in, complete open borders, rampant criminality, robbing convenience stores, robbing citizens, squatting on citizens' property without any accountability whatsoever. So it's this world situation where ordinary citizens have to endure maximum restriction on liberty and don't even get the payoff of a commensurate degree of security and safety. So it's like we're picking the worst aspects of the third world and the worst aspects of sort of a technologically advanced surveillance state. And I think that really characterizes what is distinctive about this that we're living in the United States in 2024. And as to the migrant crime, the new crime with Haitians, I mean, all the stuff with pets it's very scandalous, it's very visceral, and it touches people on a kind of on a psychological level that I think invites people to understand the scope of the problem. It's such a tangible expression of the cultural that I think exists more broadly with respect to the types of immigration that we've had for a while now, but it's just so acute and it's so undeniable and it's such a kind of scandalous expression of this that I think the silver lining is it actually really helps people to grasp the depth of the problem when it comes to our open border crisis as such. And you're seeing just, and frankly, just incredibly sad people. These are not wealthy people. These are, what Trump calls the forgotten American. And it's bad enough that we've immiserated the forgotten American by outsourcing their jobs to other countries, by demonizing them with a steady stream of decades-long sort of racially antagonistic propaganda against all of the crimes that our ruling class has visited upon the forgotten American. But to add the ultimate insult to all of those injuries, you'd think, at the very least, can we expect the government not to dump on our communities, on our rural communities, on our forgotten communities, such that their pets are being eaten? Can we even expect that?
It's a low bar, Dr. Beattie. It's a pretty low bar.
Just as a basic item of that contract, can our criminal government, at the very least, not dump Haitians in our communities that rip the heads off of geese? But apparently we can't even expect that. And that is downright outrageous.
It's so well said. And yeah, the most powerful country in the world should at least be able to to protect your community from tens of thousands of immigrants being dumped in, causing a destabilization of the social fabric. And I love that the media and the left now, what they choose to parse is the distinction between geese and pets. And Andy Biggs was on my show yesterday, and he has had geese as pets. But I think that's missing the broader point, right? If you take your children down to the local pond and park and you feed the ducks and the geese a little bit of bread and have a warm family moment, that's Americana. Like, I remember doing that with my grandmother, you know, around the little pond where she lived. And just like the thought that our community would then have to deal with someone decapitating the geese, like in front of the community, is a little much. Liberty Lantern on X says, Yuma's my hometown and it's been destroyed. Phil on Facebook says, Dr. Beattie rocks, and he used about 8 S's. So Phil's pretty fired up about that. There's another story I want to get to on revolver.news. You published this just the other day. Breaking 71-year-old grandmother killed by Haitian migrants. I'll read from the piece. What's happening in Ohio should be criminal. The Biden-Harris regime has unleashed a horde of uncivilized Haitian migrants on this red state, causing the bottom to fall out of traditional Midwest America. These migrants have wreaked havoc, squatting on property, eating pets, and leaving decent Americans living in fear. The entire plot is to turn America into a third world country. It's sadly working, and we have Comrade Kamala to thank. It goes into the details of this particular occurrence. The latest victim is a 71-year-old grandmother who was simply taking out the trash when a reckless driver mowed her down, killing her. The worst part, the driver wasn't even held accountable. Some of that coming out of the reporting from the great Anon account on Twitter, Kanoka the Great. And there's also some data here about where these folks are coming from. To Dr. Beattie's earlier point about what happens when you bring in the third world. Haiti is by far the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere with a GDP per capita at about $1,748. Haiti is the 12th most deadly country in the world with 40.9 homicides per 100,000. Haiti's education system is ranked 177th globally with a literacy rate of 61%. Haiti has one of the highest prevalences of communicable diseases in the world, the highest STD and tuberculosis rates in the Western Hemisphere. Nearly 40% of all Haitians practice some form of voodoo, which involves witchcraft and animal sacrifice. And Haiti is ranked the lowest on the Human Development Index in this region of the Americas.
But other than that, it's a great country.
Other than that, bring them on over. Y'all come, as they say in the South. And you know, again, the story of the 71-year-old woman, you know, doing nothing, essentially getting mowed down and struck by a Haitian immigrant. Like what I don't think the open borders people realize, they go out and they go find rhetorically the most sympathetic classes of immigrants, right? They say, oh, what about the children brought here by their parents? And I mean, your heart, of course, you don't blame a 5-year-old child for the immigration policies of the United States, right? Now, you're not saying amnesty, but you certainly don't blame the kid for that. Whereas, you know, here, I think the stories have to be told about the class of victims that are an acceptable collateral damage in exchange for the open border policies. Dr. Beattie.
No, it's just so unbelievably stupid and counterproductive. And, you know, in the case of these traffic violations and just traffic mess, my understanding, speaking to some sources in Ohio, is that basically if they had anything like a license in Haiti, they can just transfer that over. And they're giving them tests in their own language that are sort of doctored such that they're basically just handing them licenses, which could help. And God knows what kind of harvesting plans the authorities have for these Haitians, but they're effectively given these licenses, handed out these licenses. They have no understanding of the normal rules of the road. And they're just such tragic stories of people losing their lives unnecessarily as a result of these traffic accidents. And again, is this unique to Haitians? No, but it's especially acute here to enter in and accept the problem more generally of migration. If people look at statistics regarding drunk driving, they're especially high in Latin communities that have been pouring into the border for a long time. And so with the Haitians, the traffic problem helps to kind of introduce people to the larger dangers of having people come in from third world countries that are largely speaking incompatible culturally and across other dimensions. And these are very tangible problems. You know, people actually die from these traffic accidents, not to mention all of the indirect ramifications of that to the economy and otherwise. And the structure of it is just whenever short-term commercial interests marry with the kind of left-wing you have a very powerful force. And this undergirds the immigration problem, that you have, you know, these factories and businesses in Ohio that are of the profit margins that come from being able to hire these Haitians for basically nothing. But the Haitians aren't cheap. It's just that these factories aren't paying the full cost. The citizens of Ohio that are being run over, those are the people paying. The people who have Haitian immigrants squatting on their property, those are the people paying. The taxpayers paying for the additional burdens on hospitals, those are the people paying. So in this very narrow sense, some of these factories are able to get away with paying Haitians like $9 an hour versus the $20 an hour. God forbid they'd have to pay an American. But when you add up all of the social items, they're more expensive. It's factory owners don't have to pay for it. The taxpayers and citizens have to pay for it. And so you almost wonder, you know, I have a kind of a riff on the military industrial complex. I'm saying they make so much money off of these wars. Wouldn't we be better off just like calculating how much money they would have made on the Ukraine war and just having the government give Raytheon that amount of money and just the actual war, so at least innocent lives won't be unnecessarily lost? Maybe there could be a similar idea for the immigration thing, is find out how much these, you know, stupid factories, you know, benefiting off of like shady dollars an hour or whatever, find out how much they would benefit and just like give them the money and maybe, you know, skip the Haitian part. So it, you know, it's the economics of it are really kind of a disaster, and are the cultural factors as well, I think, that are very poignantly captured in the stories of the various headless geese and such.
I think there will be more such stories. And if folks want to see what's going on and help us tell the stories of the victims of these policies and the way, not just the victims of people who get run over, but the general degradation of American life that Dr. Beattie's been discussing, you're going to want to go to revolver.news. That's where you'll get that stuff. I'm a premium member there, so I don't have to see all the ads, which is pretty great. I want to get to one more question before we let you go, Dr. Beattie. And I want you to zoom out. And I've really heard two theories of the case as it comes to the vice president's governing philosophy, right? One is that she believes in nothing. She is just a person who is singularly driven by ambition. She's been very successful as a machine candidate coming through California's state government and then into the Senate and then into the Naval Observatory. And then there's another theory of the case that she's an avowed Marxist, that whether it's her familial history and the values that she expressed as a DA, as Attorney General, then to the left of Bernie Sanders in the United States Senate, that actually that's how she'll govern. So do you view her as like a holder of a dangerous ideology, or do you view her merely as a vessel through which others will play to an ideology but really have kind of the same mentality that's governed Biden?
Yeah, you know, that's a very interesting question, and it's always a difficult but I think important exercise to try to grasp, you know, the belief structure of people like this. I think ultimately it's kind of elusive. If I had to guess just what my gut feeling is I don't think that she is really a committed ideologue. More there, combined with ambition. That's just my intuitive sense. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters, because either way, Kamala will represent, inertia. Everything just getting worse along the same course, the same direction, just with accelerated momentum. A Kamala presidency would mean all of the weaponization of the bureaucracy, all mental DEI evidence that's contributed to now a very visible collapse in our ability to maintain, the basics of a complex civilization. The crime that's run rampant throughout everywhere. All of these things will remain in motion and just accelerate. That is how a Kamala presidency cashes out, irrespective of whatever happens to be circulating her, I would say, kind of unimpressive and uninteresting mind.
We're getting called out on Facebook. Rachel Price says Caitlyn Jenner won't be charged for her role in a deadly 4-car accident earlier this year in California. Where was our outrage during this event? So I think Dr. Beattie and
it's so hard not to make a joke about woman drivers here, but I will refrain.
Yeah, no
comment.
Yeah, no. I think if you check the record, Dr. Beattie and I were not fully on board with the Caitlyn Jennerization of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. But Dr. Beattie, thank you so much for being with me. I encourage everyone to follow these stories and much more at revolver.news. And we hope you're subscribed to the Firebrand podcast, that you're watching the Gaetz Network. That way you can catch up on all the discussions we're having on all the important issues of the day. Thanks so much for joining me, Dr. Beattie.
Thank you so much.
Roll the credits.